I was going to say something about Rich for something that I know about him in these notes, but I think I removed it. So it can be seen. At first I didn't think I was going to be able to present on a PowerPoint, so the text was written for me to read it. As you have perceived, it's not easy for us Brazilians, I mean, for me at least, to read a text in English that I have written, because I noticed the errors, like in the third word there. But and so I get confused. But that's the best way I can do. So I'm going to focus, as we have discussed, the three themes we have discussed, and I'm also going to focus on the issue of violence. But I will be more generalist than Amita. So we'll start reading. It is an honor to, and a pleasure also to be back to Mumbai. This is the third time in the city. And I really feel, as I had written, I feel attracted to the city. I hope to be back here many more times. Well, our research in Rio is dedicated to the analysis of the consequences of large-scale programs and projects in 3 communities of lower social condition in the city. Those projects are oriented towards socio-economic development, public security, and urban infrastructure. In the first case, we studied the reactions to the implementation of pacifying police unity at Favela da Maré, near the city's international airport. Who was able to see the presentation of Rio case studies? This was Breno's excellent presentation. The second case study relates to a physical intervention at Morro da Providência, which actually has also pacifying police unity. This intervention was conceived to adjust the, if you see the geography of Rio, there's a port area, an old port area that is being transformed nowadays, and there is this small hill besides the port area. And in that hill, there are those that are considered the older slums in Rio de Janeiro. They, according to at least to the story that is most commonly accepted, they are from the end of the 19th century. It is also a place where samba, which is a sort of a popular music in Brazil, was sort of created. But the problem is that that hill is exactly besides the Porto Maravilha. So there were some interventions to adjust the community of Providência to the project of Porto Maravilha. And this included a cable car that was installed in the top of the hill against the willing of the community, but with the desire of the investors in Porto Maravilha that tourists would get to see the view of the port from the top of the hill. The third case study, the efforts and impacts of City Hall to remove Vila Autódromo from the map. This is a small community located near the Olympic Park, which is being built for the 2016 Olympic Games. Mariana has presented, and Fabrizio also have presented this case study in specific perspectives on this morning's session. Well, these communities have been put in a situation of social suffering that is an affliction related to a social position and to the power strategies that reproduce both asymmetrical social relations and the interrelated objective and subjective conditions attached to each social position. We have witnessed it as researchers. Changes in habits and social practices due to the presence of coercive action of police and military forces. Mandatory insertion into higher standards of expenditure due to the new conditions of living. The sensation of instability and the possibility of anticipating and planning, I mean, for the weather, due to not just to the project that was being implemented, but to the frequent changes the project suffered. Fabrício mentioned about this in the case of Vila Autódromo. The voracity of the real estate market and its pressure over City Hall to remove poorer communities. Fabrício also mentioned the situation of a real estate developer in Rio that doesn't want poor people near the area where he's investing in. The opulent presence of new buildings and commercial spaces and the stigmatization of the poorer areas near them. And the relationship with governmental mediators whose negotiation tactics are considered by communities as unreliable and ethically censurable. I saw yesterday on the Mumbai Mirror of the Times of India a similar situation here in Mumbai. The article said, BBD Chaw's residents say MHADA, I don't know what this is, won't be allowed to redevelop their houses. I know that this is an institution that they don't trust in. That's the same thing happened in some of our communities. In many cases, intimidations happens due to threats or forced eviction, resulting in apprehension as to the maintenance of the conditions of life. Anxiety makes sense when one considers the possibility of breaking communal ties, the destruction of physical references that support collective memory, reduction of work opportunities near the new dwelling, loss of assets, dwelling, land, house land accumulated in a lifetime. The governmental market-oriented strategies, initiatives, as our state market access, associated with large-scale projects aim at simultaneous dimensions, social, physical, etc. They eventually lead to an increase of social tensions, which is increased a bit more because of the power asymmetry in the struggles. There is a disproportional distribution of political, economic, and symbolic resources. The arbitrary decision-making process, the unequal conditions of disputing and negotiating the future of the community, and the material impact of the project implementation result in intense suffering, humiliation, perception of injustice, of incapacity, sense of misrecognition, of insignificance, and of indifference. The research in Rio aims to make visible the impact of such actions on socially dispossessed groups. We believe this may help to understand the reproductive cycle of violence and to contribute to its interruption. We also seek to find positive ways people are finding to deal with oppression and the perception of injustice by highlighting actions of resistance against state violence. This was enoughly discussed this morning. I use the expression reproductive cycle of violence because we are identified with the idea that violence is perpetuated and reproduced, given that it stimulates more violence on the social fabric. Bourdieu mentions this in his book, Contre Feu. You cannot cheat with the law of the conservation of violence. All violence is paid for, and for example, the structural violence exerted by the financial markets in the form of layoffs, loss of security, etc., is matched sooner or later in the form of suicides, crime and delinquency, drug addiction, alcoholism, a whole host of minor and major everyday acts of violence. Violence leads to violence. This is a popular way to present the idea that violence is conserved in the form of brutality and social suffering. For those like myself that believe we can't think of another world, I noticed that on the walls of Rio, an extremely violent city, we are constantly reminded by someone who has experienced great violence and lost that kindness leads to kindness. Violence is expressed in different forms. We know that according to the common understanding of urban violence, Mumbai is a much safer city than Rio. We are also led to think that violence reaches anyone, everyone, indiscriminately. One way of assessing, criticizing this common sense knowledge on the status of urban violence is to ask to whom is it violence more or less violent? Is it the city more or less violent? In Rio, for instance, the young black male are frequently the victims of violence. Another way to reframe the question is to understand the fundamentals of its definitions. What exactly are we talking about when we talk about violence? And this brings us to a dispute in terms of the academic definitions of what violence and the relationship between scholars and the state, and the contribution of researchers to the state market access action. There are dominant definitions of violence. These are frequently related to the interpersonal violence and whatever is classified as a criminal act. Accepting violence as equivalent to criminal acts leads states to increase investments in police and in harshening the legislation. In Rio, this is immediately translated into state brutality, that is police brutality, and the criminalization of property. That's exactly the direct effect of such a perspective of what violence means. And this, as I said previously, is supported by some scholars. They take the notion of violence as codified in law. That is, that's what tends to be visible because it was actually codified. It's quantifiable and bring it to their research. And usually, I've heard and read this a great number of times. This idea always comes with this paradox, which is written here in this line. The increase of wealth is accompanied by the increase of criminality. And so, usually criminality is thought of as related to poverty, and a lot of institutions, decisions, legislation, money goes to this sort of actions toward the issue of violence. I'm sorry. This sort of explanation do not satisfy us. First, we understand that they are based on common sense or juridical categories without considering the social struggles from which these categories became institutionalized. Second, they seem to be a projection of the other social position, which ignore and obscure the social determinism experienced by groups in lower social positions. I forgot to say that the idea always comes also with the notion that the violence is an individual act. So you disregard the social understanding of the violence problem of violence, and you think of the problem of that specific individual that committed a crime, for instance. In a way that differs from the dominant identification of violence with criminality, we can consider the notion of violence has been changing, meaning that it is still under dispute. One of the ways to define it is violence is a violation of integrity, an expropriation of the group of individuals or individuals' physical and mental dignity. This definition expresses both physical and subjective dimensions of violence. Any violence has a psychological dimension. This dimension is essential to define violence as such, since it establishes meaning to suffering supported or imposed. So there is never physical violence without subjective violence, although the opposite may be true. This definition also dislocates the focus from the agent inflicting violence to the victim of it. The focus on an inferior position of an unequal relationship helps to diminish the emphasis on the legitimacy of the action by the strong, and to highlight, while highlighting the experience of injustice that is on the weak side. And this is more or less what I was saying yesterday about our fundamentals in this research. It should be noticed that violence is also a particular way of expression of social power. It is obviously immanent to unequal social relations. It is a resource to maintain or to change established dissymmetric relations. It is a resource consistently used, however, unequally distributed, being regulated, that is, classified in legislation according to the struggles in society. Therefore, it frequently takes the dominant attached to it. Violence can be made invisible, that is, ignored, but it can also be recognized. Violence can be made legitimate, or tolerated, or repressed. This explains the intensity of the disputes on the meaning of violence and the public policies on urban security in Brazil. The scholarly debate being just a glimpse, a mirror of such a dispute. Classifications will result in social institutions and practice which will have legal, economic, and social effects in the city. I know I have already said this, I want to stress it. Our research wants to pay attention and to be able to see and to make visible the invisible violences, accepted, tolerated, not codified. We are working to understand its effects on the studied communities. This makes us capture narratives, understand the arguments, the justifications, and appeals for legal rights and social justice. We intend to be able to gather evidences, and I think we have gathered so far sufficient evidences to understand the process by which the logics of the perpetrator is accepted by the victims. This would be interesting examples of symbolic violences, of which Amita was talking about, and the accumulation of violence. The distance between social positions and the advantages and disadvantages within them is often perceived as unfair. Injustice diminishes the person or the group in the lower positions, highlighting its weaknesses and impotence. However, unjust victims often choose not to recognize the injustice of the situation, mainly because of the degrading nature of being a victim. This is the essence of the notion of symbolic violence. It is consented. Doesn't it seem a category to understand violence in our unequal societies? Nonetheless, symbolic violence has also objective results. Violence suffered in painful is painful, because it shows that the one who experiences it is vulnerable. It points out to the perception of powerlessness and inferiority, thus implying humiliation. It might later result in what I was going to read here. Symbolic violence, identified with the disdain for the other, contributes to the possibility of physical violence. the dominant feel authorized to attack the devalued, while the members of the group dominated rebel against confinement in a social position, status no longer acceptable. How much time do I have? 2 minutes. Okay. I knew this was going to happen, so I have already highlighted some parts in the end, in which I mentioned some of the findings of our case studies. I was very humble here, getting material that I am mostly familiar with it. I'm being fed, say, by Mariana, which is, where are you here, Mariana? Mariana Medeiros, Breno Câmara. Breno's not here. Oh, I have to reduce his salary. Breno and Leticia and a bunch of other people that are really important in this research. Of course, there is, in parallel, Fabrício, Gisele, Renato, there are other team members that are sort of feeding me. So, but I came to what is more common to me, and I will limit myself to 1 or 2 observations. First of all, in this highlighted sentences here, I mentioned some of the strategies of City Hall. City Hall has, of course, first pressured communities trying to pay for the houses with lower prices. And Mariana presented a bit of this story earlier today. Then there was some sort of psychological pressure. City Hall officials came to the Vila Autódromo, I'm being specific to this neighborhood, and marked the houses as, you know, the Jewish houses in Nazi Germany. That's more or less, there was no symbol like that, but there were numbers, and they meant something. That was a really scary thing. They also spread rumors and information that made residents unsure of what was actually going to happen. Most people, large majority, stayed so far. And the price paid for the houses started going up. Some left the premises. There were also some other explanations. I don't think I will be able to talk about them here. But some houses were left, and so the municipality began demolishing them. But they wouldn't take the debris out of the Vila Autódromo. So the appearance of the community was that of a devastated sort of, you know, those pictures we see about sort of, say, something in Syria, and all those wars that we are witnessing by TV today. That's more or less what Vila Autódromo resembles. Some empty spaces, a lot of debris on the floor, and so there were problems of, these were the violent epics, problems of rats, dirt, interruption of water, impossibility of circulation of cars, the machine that were working on the nearby construction, because the auditorium is right beside the Olympic Park. When you see the Olympic Games, I don't know what's going to happen. Fabrício may know a little bit more of the future. But either you see some few residents, 40, how much were saying, Fabrício? There are 40, I don't know, 40 residents still in Vila Autódromo?
No, 100.
100, maybe. 100 families, maybe you won't see anything. but it's on the side of the Olympic Park. Anyway, we try to think of these strategies as the ways by which the state, and I'm saying I'm removing the market access, the market part here, because it's on behalf of the population, of the general population of Rio de Janeiro, that these interventions are being made. It is directly conducted by state officials. It's voiced by the mayor. The market access seems always to be on the background. It's just in terms of appearance. But anyway, I think they give us a more or less idea of what sort of finances we are witnessing in Rio. I thank you for the time.